Good afternoon. Welcome to the broadcast. We'd like for you to stay tuned to the broadcast today. We're going to be bringing a message this afternoon on getting control of your child or your brat or whatever people refer to your children as. I don't believe that any brats are born. I believe that they're created by improper training, and of course all of us do train our children. Either we train them to be disrespectful or we train them to be respectful. And so I believe that our children are a net result of what we have done. There's no bad children born. There's bad children that are trained and trained to be bad. And, a lot of times people teach their children to be bad by telling them they're bad. You're just like your old man. You're just like so-and-so. You're always bad, and that type of thing. And of course, the child lives up to that goal or that standard that you've set for them. And so we'll be talking about getting control. And so I would like to remind you that this is our last broadcast for a while. And so we will be seeking to come back on the air at a later date when we get caught up with our bills and so forth, broadcast bills, and whenever we're able to come back on the air, we'll seek to try to come back on. This has been a good time of the day. A lot of you listen regularly. I believe that there are really thousands of you that listen. We've had a lot of you respond, but most of you have not responded with any money. And so we don't feel bad about that at all. We do feel that a broadcast ought to be sustained by the people that listen to it. Our church people, they attend church regularly, most of them, and we have tapes available in the services of the messages and so forth, different subjects that we cover. And so the broadcast has been primarily for folks outside the congregation, and of course I'm opposed to radio preachers and television preachers getting on the air and robbing the churches of tithes and offerings. I believe it's wrong for you to send your tithes and your offerings to a radio preacher. I believe it's right for you to give an offering over and above your tithe and offering to your local church. It's right for you to send money to a broadcaster, someone that's helped you a great deal. But I do not believe that it's right for you to take your tithe out of the local church. And this is the reason that a lot of you have not sent any offering to our churches, because I've taught this from day number one, and this is what the Bible teaches. And even though it would wind up maybe in your estimation cutting my own throat by teaching that way, I'm going to teach the Bible whether you like it or not, or whether you support the broadcast or not, or whether I'm even on the air or not. And of course, whenever you do it the Bible way, then there's some cost to that. You have to count the cost of whether or not you're going to teach people to do wrong. And if you can salve people's conscience by telling them they're wonderful, they're great, they're good, they're just marvelous and scrumptious and just all kinds of good, and they are giving you money and dropping money here and money there, and helping you along the way, why, it's awful tempting for you to go ahead and teach them wrong, like certain radio and television preachers that preach about the prayer towers and about all the anointed junk that they want to send out. And let me tell you something, God can answer a prayer from your closet, from your bedroom, from your bathroom. God can answer a prayer from your car, from your living room, from your kitchen. He can answer a prayer from my office here. He can answer a prayer from any place as well as he can from a prayer tower. So you don't need to spend millions of dollars to get up in the air a little ways to pray. And of course, that doesn't appeal to the flesh, does it? And so if I was to come on the air and say, I've got a prayer tower over here, and if you will send me your prayer request and so forth, why, you would wrap those prayer requests with a $10 bill and send it on over, and you'd think you'd done a great, tremendous thing, and at the same time, why, you've oiled my machinery and so forth. And let me tell you something, I'm not going to lie to you whether you ever give me a buck or not. And I have never ministered to anybody for money. As a matter of fact, I didn't go into the ministry for money. I was making money a long time before I ever thought about being a preacher. And since I've been a preacher, I haven't made any money. As a matter of fact, I have done a lot of things, but I haven't had much money to do them. And I don't believe the Lord judges us on the basis of whether or not we have money. I said all that to say this. I will not be on this station next Saturday at this time. But if I can ever be of any blessing or help to you, I'd like for you to write my telephone number down. And as I mentioned 2 weeks ago on the broadcast, there's a family that we made contact with. That family first, the first contact about 12 years ago, and 2 or 3 of the children got saved. We had a project of going out on the streets, picking up gangs and people that were out on the streets in vans and bringing them in, feeding them, and then I would preach to them. And so about 12 years ago, 3 kids got saved, and they dropped away. They never did get involved with the church. And so their father got very sick, and the youngest girl remembered me, and she called me up and asked me if I'd go see her dad in the hospital that was dying of cancer. And so I went and led him to the Lord. And it was only a few hours before he passed away, and led him to a saving knowledge of Jesus Christ. And he was so glad that he was saved, and he was so thankful. And less than 30 hours later, he passed away, went out to meet God. And so that was from 11, 12 years ago. And maybe you won't need me for a while, but you ought to write my name down. You ought to write it in some way where you could remember how to get a hold of me. Now, what I usually do as far as my filing system is concerned, I file certain names under what I can remember. Like if it has to do with a plumber, I will put plumber and then put his name, or bulldozer, or backhoe, and then put the fellow's name or whatever it is. And so whatever you have to do, write my name down, Barney Lee. If you want to put it down under loudmouth preacher, well, you can do that. Or if you want to put it down under busybody, you can do that. But my name is Barney Lee, Dr. Barney Lee, and my telephone number is, my home telephone number is 824-0498. And I'll give that to you again in just a moment. And then the church telephone number is, the church is Center Road Baptist Church, and the telephone number at Center Road Baptist Church is 675-6545. So my home telephone number is 824-0498, and the church number is 675-6545. And if I can ever be of blessing or help to your family, please let me. Now, the biggest struggle with getting a human tamed or branded with proper manners or good morals is made easy if you'll be sure it has been accomplished before age 6. And so some of you that have children that are older than that are not under control, it's going to be hard for you. But, you know, I heard Lester Roloff one time, and I suppose this is why they locked him up. I don't know. But I agree with him anyway, and you can put me down as a nut if you want to. But he said if you got a teenager and you don't have control of them, you better get control. If you have to tie them up when they're asleep, tie them down to the bed with a log chain or whatever you got to do, and get control of them now. And tie them to a tree or whatever you have to do. Let them go as long as what the rope is or whatever. But you need to get control of your kids. And so, you know, it'll be a lot easier if you will be the one to get control than if you put them out into the hands of a judge or policeman or somebody like that. And so you need to get control of your kids. And the longer you wait, the bigger the problem and the more force you'll have to have. You know, it takes a fellow that weighs 150, 180 pounds, and he's standing about 5.5, 6 foot tall. It's going to take a lot more to bring that fellow under control than it would have if you'd started whenever he was only about 20 pounds and when he was about 3 foot high. And so the longer you wait, the bigger the problem is going to be and the more force you're going to have. Now, in the book of 1 Samuel, chapter 3, verse 11 through 14, it says, "And the Lord said unto Samuel, Behold, I do a thing in Israel, at which both the ears of every one that heareth it shall tingle. In the day I will perform against Eli all things." In that day, I will perform against Eli all the things which I have spoken concerning his house. When I began, I will also make an end. And I have told him that I will judge his house forever for the iniquity which he knoweth, because his sons made themselves vile, and he restrained them not. And therefore I have sworn unto the house of Eli, that the iniquity of Eli's house shall not be purged with sacrifice nor offering forever. So God said, I've had it with Eli. I've had it with him. I don't care what he does now. I have judged his house. And he's not going to be able to stand. You know, I believe this is the reason that a lot of families, why God takes their name off the face of the earth. As a matter of fact, if you go ahead and read in the book of 1 Samuel chapter 4, you'll see how that God performed those things that he said he was going to perform. Now, Eli didn't even try to restrain his boys until they were men. Now, he had Samuel in his house. Hannah had brought Samuel over to his house, to the priest's house, to train and so forth. And so he taught Eli, and he trained him in the ways of the Lord, because that was the specific thing that he was there for. He was there to be trained. Now, Samuel himself, I believe, was more taught than he was trained, because he turned out to train his children the way that Eli's children was trained. And so he saw the example in Eli's children, and Samuel's kids went bad, just like Eli's kids went bad. And I believe the reason for it was that he was not really trained. He didn't really know the reasons back of what Eli did. All he did was hear the teachings. And so whenever a person has been taught the right way only, then that individual can be taught something differently. They can be either trained in a right way or a wrong way from there. I believe that the reason that the Catholics are so strong as far as holding their people has been over the years, and of course that's different now. A great deal is different as far as the Catholic religion is concerned. But I think over the years the reason that the people were so strong in Catholicism is the training that was involved with children. Of course, they don't train their children all that much anymore. Some of the people see the value of moral discipline and different things like that, but I'm talking about overall. It's not the strong emphasis that it used to be even preschool and right on up through the grammar school and so forth. And so it is that people today really don't train their children in the ways of the Lord. We need to train the will and the spirit of a child. The will, the act or process of volition, the longing or desire, inclination to pleasure or to appetite, lust. All this is having to do with the will. Something wished by a person, a request, command, desire, a strong purpose, intention, determination, self-direction, deliberate action or choice, disposition or attitude towards others. All of this is having to do with the will, and we need to break the will of a child. And when that child's will is broken, then you can bend that child's will to your own will. Now, it's important that you not break their spirit. And of course, we'll get into that on down here a little bit. But the idea I want to get across is the ability to cause a person to be flexible, willing to bow to authority. When a horse has been broken, his will is adjustable to his master's will. And when a child's will has been broken, then his will is adjustable to his parents' will. Now, the Spirit is the life principle, courage, vigor, the thinking, motivating, feeling part of a man. Life consciousness, individuality, temper, vigor, enthusiasm, loyalty to a cause, essential characteristics and qualities prevailing or tendencies, attitude, inspiration, animating principle, the quality of a person's personality. And so this is the spirit part of an individual, and you don't want to break the spirit. And the way you can tell if a child or an adult's will has been broken is to give them some kind of a response that they don't like and see how they respond to it. Something against their will. See how they do. A passive child will usually sulk or cry, and many times an adult. If you cross their will, like if you as a husband will say something that your wife does not like, if her will has never been broken, what she'll do is sulk or cry. And a husband, a lot of times, if the wife does something against his will, then he's rebellious and he goes into a rage. And so there's a lot of adult people that I know whose will has never been broken. And of course, until they come to that place in their life that their will has been broken, they're pretty well useless as a human being. You can't do much with them. Until a person's will has been broken, they cannot be trained effectively. Until a mule or a horse has been broken, you can't ride him. You can, after he has been broken, after his will has been broken, you can match him, you can plow him, he's a useful individual. But until that time, he is useless, and that's the way it is with a wife or with a husband. That is, their will has never been broken. Then they're pretty well useless. You can't teach them anything. You're not going to be able to go anywhere with them as far as maturing. They're always going to be a brat, even if they're 90 years of age. If they go into a rage whenever their will is crossed, their will has never been broken, and they're never going to be very much value because they're not trainable. Until a person's will has been broken, you can't do anything with them. Parents should be the ones to break their children's will. Somebody that loves them, somebody that's concerned about them, somebody that doesn't want them to grow up to be something that they don't want to be. It's done easiest when the child is very young. And a clear-cut case of wrongdoing has been dealt with until the child shows love instead of defiance. An angry child is not sweet. They are distasteful to themselves and to others. Now, the prodigal son in Luke chapter 15 had his will broken, but not his spirit. And unfortunately, it was out after a great deal of expense. He had spent all of the money that was coming to him. He had spent half of his father's living. He had gone off into a far country, and his will got broken in a pig pen down in a foreign country. Now, it would be far better if you would break the will of your 2 or 3 year old child while he's still under your care, and then you'll have all of those years to enjoy that child, and that child will be able to enjoy themselves, and whenever they go out on their own, they'll be useful human beings, and they won't be wasting their time and other people's time trying to get them under control. And it'll be so much simpler if you'll do it when the child is small. Now, the child whose will has not been broken will say such things when he is angry as, "I hate you. I wish you were dead." And some of you have had your children talk back to you or wish some kind of tragedy to come on the one that crossed them. The most kind thing that you can do to your children is to break their will. As long as a horse will throw his rider, he is the master. But when the rider rides that horse until that horse gives up or hollers uncle or whatever way you want to put it, then that horse is a useful animal. Now, when a child can be told something completely against his will, and by anybody, I don't mean just by somebody, but when a child can be told something that is against their will and they respond in a positive manner, his will has been broken. Now, there's a lot of biblical principles as far as dealing with children and how to manage a child and so forth. And we have covered some of it. Verbal correction is important, but spanking is God's way. And this is in Proverbs chapter 19, verse 18. Now, you can break a child's will without spanking. Usually, if you break a child's will without spanking, though, that is going to be done within the first few weeks of that child's life. You can break a child's will by letting them cry if the child is real small. Now, what you have to do if the child is still an infant, you don't want to be beating on the child and so forth. Now, I know that there's folks that advocated that you pull their diapers off and that you really blister their behind. And I don't throw that out altogether. You may put me down as weird, too. But as a matter of fact, my son got his first spanking when he was about 3 months old. Now, listen to me for just a minute. Now, my wife and I lived in an apartment. There was no places available for people to live. We stood in a line a half a block long to get that apartment, and we believe that it was God's doing to give us the apartment to begin with. And the landlord told us that one thing, we were a young couple and so forth, and had no children. The landlord said whenever we rented the apartment, he says, now you understand that the reason I didn't rent to these other people was most all of them had children, or they were not married. And so he said, I wanted a couple in the apartment, and so I'm renting it to you. But the moment that you get pregnant, then you start looking for a place. And of course, he was talking to my wife when he said that. And so he said, the moment that she gets pregnant, when you start looking for a place, and when the baby is born, I want that baby born someplace else. I don't want that baby in this house. There's other tenants in here, and I don't want them complaining and so forth. Well, the time came, and my wife got pregnant, and she gave birth to our son. And so I went to the landlord, and I told the landlord that that we had a child and so forth, and we hadn't been able to find a place. And I said, all the neighbors have given me these letters and said that we want you to stay in the apartment. We'd become friends with the other 5 families in the apartment, and so they said, we'll give you these letters and you stay in the apartment. And the landlord said, okay. But he said, now if you have one complaint, if there's one complaint, if anybody complains against you whatsoever, you're going to have to move out. And so for the first 3 months, my wife and I both worked, and we worked opposite shifts and so forth. She would take care of him when I was working. I would take care of him when she was working. And the moment that child would cry or whimper a little bit, we hit the floor, and we were taking care of that child before the child even got a chance to whimper. Well, he caught on to that business real quick. And he was able to just time it when we just about got asleep, and he would start yelling out. And so we were just about fit to be tied. We were just sick from lack of sleep and go around with our eyes half closed and so forth. And so after about 3 months of it, I had taken all that I could take, and I had explained to him, and of course he was only 3 months old. He couldn't understand English, I guess. And so I went over to the bed, and I says, now, Kenny, you are going to quit this business. And I rolled him over on his stomach, and his padded diaper, his mother had 2 diapers on him, and that's back when you only had the cloth diapers and so forth, and she had 2 cloth diapers on him, and I took my 3 middle fingers, and I spanked him on his diaper 2 or 3 times, and I said, now you be quiet. And he was quiet, and he quieted right down, went to sleep, and that was the last we had any trouble with him. And but what I'm saying is, when they're young like that, you can do it pretty easy. But you wait until they get older, and oh boy, it's going to take a judge and a jury, and it's going to take a prison sentence and policemen and everybody else to tame that brat. And so you need to tame him yourself. You love him, right? You need to build a strong bond between you and that child, that just a cross word will cause that child to cry. And if you build that strong of a bond between your child and yourself, you give them reasons for every command that you give them. You back up what you say. You're not inconsistent. The things that you say no today, you're going to be saying no to tomorrow, and so forth. And you're consistent, and the child is not able to whine and get their own way. If you are consistent, and then if you build a strong bond between you and the child, and a couple of slaps on the rear end, I don't mean any place else, not across the face, not jerking their hair, not banging them with anything, but I mean right on the rear end, the place where God made for them to be spanked. If you'll spank them right on their rear end and say, "Now, hon, I didn't want to do that. I really didn't want to spank you. I didn't really want to do that. But I don't want you to be bad either. And if you won't ever do that again, I won't have to spank you for that ever again." And if you'll break that child's will. Now, let me just say this. Don't let that child cry until you, if it's a baby, until you have checked them out as far as their comfort is concerned. Check them to make sure that there's no rash. Make sure that the diaper is not wet. Make sure that there's nothing in his clothing that's sticking him. Make sure the bed where he's laying is comfortable, and make sure that child has eaten. Now, that's not a good test in itself, because there's a lot of children whose formula is not sufficient, and the baby will cry because the formula is not sufficient. And so what you need to do in that case, if you are not sure whether or not the baby's continual crying has to do with formula, then the easiest thing for you to do is to take a cloth, and of course I can't say on the air what we used to call it when I was a kid coming up, but we used to take a cloth and take and put some sugar in it, wet the sugar a little bit, and put it in that cloth, and then tie a rubber band or something around the end of it, so that or a knot, so that the child can suck on that sugar for a few minutes, and the sugar will satisfy the child's appetite for about an hour. And so you can tell whether or not a child is suffering because of a deficiency in the diet by just giving them sugar. And if they quit crying for about an hour and then they start crying again, it's not the sugar that they're after as they're not satisfied. Now, even though they have eaten and they're full, if they're crying, it does not mean that they have all the nourishment that they need. It could be that they're still hungry even though their belly is full. And so what you need to do is check out, make sure that there is no nutritional problem. Take them to the doctor. Make sure that there's no nutritional problem. Make sure they're comfortable. And then if there are all of those things, let them cry. Let them cry it out. And that'll break their will, and then you'll be able to train them, and you'll be able to reason with them. But don't run over to that child and pick them up every time they whimper. That if the child is a little bit older, then you're going to have to use stronger methods. And of course, we've explained it in this character building kit that we've got, and we'd like for you to send for it. This is the last time that we'll be on the air for a while, and so write down my name, my telephone number, Dr. Barney Lee. 675-6545, 824-0498. That's my telephone numbers. And I'll give you the address: Center Road Baptist Church, West Seneca, New York, 14224. 412 Center Road, West Seneca, New York, 14224. And if I can ever be of any blessing or help to your family, I'd like to be. And why don't you come on out and visit our services? In the summer months, a lot of folks do visit. Last summer, we had a lot of visitors from the broadcast. All winter long, we've had quite a few visitors. We've had scores of families come out to our services because of the broadcast, and we've had a lot of people write to us. And so come by and see us and let us know that you're praying for us. And anything that I can ever do or be a blessing to you or any of your family, well, don't hesitate to call on me, and I'll be glad to do anything I can. Again, my name is Barney Lee. The address is 412 Center Road Baptist Church, West Seneca, New York, 14224. And if you'd like to have these tapes, why, just drop me a note, and I'll be glad to send them out to you, or anything else that I can do for you. So God bless you. Thank you for listening, and may the Lord bless you.